it's not about me. It's not about what I want. It's not that I want to be friendly and have this nice, warm environment. That's not what people need from me as their leader. Sometimes, as the leader, I need to do what's personally painful. I need to create an environment where I am completely alienated so that the team comes together.
I'm Amy Woodall, and this is The Conscious Habit, a show from the People Forward Network. We're teaching you how to incorporate love and consciousness at work, at home, and the world at large. I'm Amy Woodall, and you're listening to the Conscious Habit Podcast. Today, my dear friend, Desiree Garcia, the founder of Vida Aventura, joins me as co-host. Together, we host the High Vibe Tribe retreats. We founded these retreats to have magical, transformational experiences for women in the highest vibe places around the world. And this new co-hosted series with Des and me is really intended to share more of our collective consciousness work to help you take a deep dive inside yourself and to elevate your vibe and your experience on this planet. Take a listen.
Okay, everyone, I'm so excited to have our guest on the podcast today, Jolie Rhinehart, with Phillips 66. And the reason why I feel like Jolie's going to be such a great person for us to learn from is, you know, when you have had the opportunity to work with a leader that gets it. The minute I met Jolie, I knew that she got it. And she is someone who is really focused on developing her people and getting the best out of others first. So it's really just a selfless leadership. And what I've seen in terms of how she has transformed teams that she's worked with it's just been awe-inspiring. So super to have you on the podcast today, Jolie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm honored to be here.
So I'm going to jump right in and ask you, in your opinion, what does conscious leadership, what does that mean to you?
Conscious leadership to me means really being present and aware, recognizing the needs that each individual on the team has and the needs I have as a leader, but adapting as I can to serve those that work for me, to help them show up to be their best, but recognizing that we are all human, we all have flaws, but doing everything to be present and to help each person on the team, including myself, be our best person and the best we can for each other.
There are things that speak to my soul, and from a leadership perspective, you hit all of the big points of that. One thing that I'm curious about is how do you? I mean, you're bringing this presence, and you're there to serve. How do you get to know what really matters to others?
So one of the things that I've done, I've changed jobs very frequently, although I've been with Phillips 66 for 25 years as I've progressed in my career. And one of the things I started using back in 2015 was a book called The First 90 Days. And it talks about when you go into a new role, is your first 30 days is collect information, figure out the state of the group, the team. Are we in a position where we are successful? So as the leader or the supervisor of that group, how do I sustain success? Or is it a group where we're not aligned in values and maybe I need to figure out how to understand each of the individuals, help them feel and have some psychological safety so they can show up at their best. And so, but build the foundation, start to understand what's our state. Then the second 30 days is start to introduce myself into the equation. And then the final 30 days of the first 90 days is start to implement some changes. In that first 30 days, the focus that I've taken when I come onto a new team is meeting with each of the people that work for me one-on-one. And I have a list of questions I like to ask them. And it's not a standard, well, what do you do here? It's tell me about the favorite job you've ever had and why. Tell me about your favorite supervisor you've ever had and why. Tell me about the major obstacle you've had to overcome to get to where you are today. And from that, it helps me understand a little bit about the backgrounds. And one of the most interesting and probably disappointing things that I learn with every new team in that first 30 days is there are so many people who have never worked for someone that they actually trust has their best interest at heart. So a big part of my job as a team leader is building trust with people who have never trusted a supervisor in, for some of them, decades of experience. So proving to them that I do want them to succeed, that I do want their best interest, that I am here to serve them. And that takes some time, but it's about building first that relationship trust one-on-one, listening, paying attention, taking action to try to help them. But once I learn about each of them, then I meet with my peers. I try to learn and understand what the state is and the perception of my team and what the focus should be for. And I always ask everybody this question as well. What are the first three things that you would focus on if you were me? And it's always an interesting tell. And sometimes I end up doing it. Sometimes it's easy things like we don't have enough parking, we don't have a cafeteria, and I don't know, we don't have the lights don't work in the office or the bathrooms aren't clean. Like it's never really easy stuff, but if it is, I can just get those things done. But a lot of times it's we don't ever make any decisions. We don't work together as a team, and it helps me get a baseline focus. But that's the start. And then I always come up with only three things that I want to change. To me, if you try to change more than three things, and even three sometimes is a lot, it's what is the intended outcome. And then I'm very public about it. I tell everybody on the team, this is what I've learned. I don't disclose any specifics or confidential information, but it's here's what I've heard. Here's what I'm thinking the focus is going to be. What do you think about that? And trying to recognize too is meeting people where they are. There's a lot of people who are not as extroverted as I am, and who in a group setting will be quiet and not participate, recognizing, okay, I need to meet with them one-on-one. I need to give them the day's notice that I want to talk to them about this tomorrow, or I'd like them to brainstorm on here are my three things that I want to focus on. What do you think? And so, but it really is, it takes time to build that trust and to help build the collaboration. But that's where I start is one-on-one. And then as I progress, I really try to work on the collaboration amongst the team, help build those relationships, because what I ultimately want is for the team to function very well and not have everything have to come through me.
It takes time, right? And I think our instinct and our impulse is to just get in there and get the work done, start getting the work done. And taking that time, having that patience to understand and build and foster those relationships. You can tell by your progression, your career progression, it's made a huge difference, which is why they keep moving you every couple of years.
I'm curious, Jolie, when I'm listening to your leadership philosophy, how you have approached every new position coming in, how you've really slowed down and you are patient and you realize like this is going to take time to earn their trust. They need to be heard, they need to be seen, they need to be understood. Have you always gotten that right? Or is this a path you went down because you were like, oh, I went in guns a-blazing and people weren't super receptive to me? Or did you learn? Was it by having somebody do it wrong unto you that you learned how to do it right unto others? Where did that start?
Oh, absolutely. So I am a very tenacious person with my foundational background. I worked my first 13 years with Phillips 66 at a single refinery in Pennsylvania. And as I progressed there, I don't want to say it was easier, but because I had relationships with the workforce there and the people, when I would move into, I still had changed roles probably every 30 months or so. but I didn't have to start with the relationship building. It was more, now what's the job, what's the focus, and I could hit the ground running and felt very productive. My first role where I transferred out of that facility, I went after never moving. I moved from Pennsylvania to Washington State, so 3,000 miles away. My mom will say, Jolie never moved, and then she moved to the farthest corner of the country. And I came in as an operations manager. So I went from a facility where I had worked my way up to having a couple hundred reports to then I was the operations manager in charge of the whole facility with significantly higher responsibility level. And I did not follow that protocol. So I hit the ground running. I'm like, okay, first thing, assess these people, get to know them. And I'm quick to assess and trust. And I'm also, and that was a big learning for me because I said right away, okay, I met these people. This is great. All right, you're going to do a great job. You're going to do a great job. And then they would tell me that they were doing something, and I realized they didn't. And actually, I have kind of a funny story about this because I had, before my husband and I moved to Washington State, I had never lived out of the Northeast of the country, and in particular, the suburbs of Philadelphia. And so there is a delicious treat in Philadelphia in the suburbs called water ice. Have either of you heard of it?
No.
And so, yeah, Rita's Water Ice is a brand that now is starting to pop up across the country. But water ice it's kind of like Italian ice, but it's a cup that it comes in, and you can order cases of it there, and you eat it by scraping it. It sounds bizarre when I say it now, but I had never lived anywhere where this was not an option. And in the Northeast, when it gets hot out at the refinery, we would buy cases of this treat. It would be like cups of ice cream, but water ice is a thing there. And I just assumed it was available everywhere. So skip ahead to, I'm at our Washington State refinery. It's getting hot out. So I say to my team, all right, why don't we get some water ice for the folks out in the facility? Oh, yes, ma'am. They get it. So later in the day, I go down. I want to see, like, oh, I'll have water ice with the folks. And it's a bunch of like coolers of bottles of water. So I'm thinking, this is not a treat. And so I go and ask again, like, didn't I ask you guys to get water ice? Oh, yes, we got it. I'm like, well, how about tomorrow? Let's get water ice. Oh, yes, ma'am. So this goes on for 3 days, and the operators in the facility finally call me, and they're like, could you tell them to stop bringing down the bottles of water? And I'm like, gosh, I've been asking for this ice water. On day 4, I get my team together. I'm like, is there some kind of malfunction with you people that I'm asking for water ice and you keep getting bottles of water? And finally, one of the guys that works for me said, I'm so sorry, Jolie. Is water ice different than ice water? And it was a complete eye opener for me. And I had been the ops manager at that point for over 6 months. So I had a team of people who absolutely were operating under a culture of compliance. And in my mind, I was running a culture of critical thinking. So I'm thinking, they obviously know that I want them to give me dissenting opinions and tell me what's going on. And this is a bit of a frivolous example because it had to do with bringing bottles of water versus essentially an ice cream type treat. But it was a complete wake-up call for me where I realized I was running a completely different organization than my team was aware of. And the fear of, how do I get this team to start functioning as a unit and coming to me with actual feedback and issues? And so what I ended up doing, and I hadn't yet read that first 90 days book, but what I ended up doing is I will have dreams about things. And so I had a dream, and I love to read. But believe it or not, as you both probably know, there's lots of people who don't really like to read. And it's not that they can't read, it's just not what they enjoy doing. And at this point, I had a group of lovely gentlemen who worked for me, and they certainly all could read. But the idea of sitting down to read a leadership book is probably the furthest thing from what they wanted to do. But I thought, you know what? I have something that I'm going to bring them together. And so I read a lot of leadership books, and there's a leadership book, I won't say the name because it's not a good book. It was a really hard read, it's badly written, it doesn't make any sense. And I thought, I know how I'm going to bring them together. I'm going to make them read this terrible book. And so I tell them, and none of the folks that work for me, of the at this point 220, the supervisors, is probably 50 of the supervisors, only two of them are engineers, and so the rest of them are what we call through the ranks, where they start on the tools in the field as operators and work their way up to supervisory positions. And so again, that doesn't mean that they can't read, but that they definitely did not prefer to read for an enjoyable activity. So I tell them, we're going to do a leadership book club. And they all, oh, yes, Jolie, because again, don't forget, I had a culture of compliance. And so, and I know this book is literally unintelligible. It's so badly written. And so I buy them the book and I tell them, you have to read, start with the intro, which was particularly badly written, and the first three chapters. And you have 1 week to do it. And you would see, so one at a time, people come and see, oh, Jolie, I don't know if you know, so and so doesn't think this is a good idea. He doesn't like the book. You're really, people are not going to support you in this. I'm like, I don't care. And I must have had almost all 50 of these guys come and see me. And I tell them no. And so I'm thinking, maybe this is going to work. So I bring them together for the first meeting. And I told them it was a mandatory meeting. Even if they were off shift, they had to come in for the meeting. So they come in, and it's the first time ever that I'm having a meeting, and they're all sitting together. They're all complaining about the book club. They're complaining about the book. It was the first time I ever saw them work together as a team. So I asked them, oh, how do you like the book? And they all kind of sit there. Nobody said anything. And finally, one of them said, we don't like this book. We don't think it makes any sense. It's hard to understand. And then they're all like, yeah, we agree. And they ganged up on me. It was awesome. I'm like, the first time you ever worked together as a team. We are going to fight our way through this book, and you're going to support each other. You're going to help each other understand it. And it took us a month. We got through it kind of essentially a chapter at a time. But by the end, they finally had started to trust each other and work together. And I really believe it was the beginning of, I built a really highly performing team, work together. And so I thought, okay, and I ended up, I only got to work at that facility for another 2 years, but really we were kind of full speed ahead at that point. So then I got transferred to our Southern California refinery, and I thought, how am I going to build this team? How do I figure out where I'm coming from? And the gentleman who I worked for down there told me, I want you to read the first 90 days and give me your 90-day plan. And so that gave me a framework where I could be more systematic about building that versus kind of a shot in the dark and figure out if I can build the team.
I love that. I mean, what an interesting way, like a very different way of bringing that team together. Again, like it, to me, it's like very counterintuitive.
Ladies, imagine taking time away to work on you. Meditation, yoga, transformational work, a chance to have grand adventures and build lasting relationships. Desiree Garcia and I founded High Vibe Tribe Retreats to create just that. And if you're curious about joining us on our next retreat, head over to highvibetriberetreat.com, link in the show notes. There's a lot of teams out there, I think, Jolie, that would have that saying with like, how do I get my people to speak up? How do I get them to, as we know, I'm sure you're a big fan of the 5 Dysfunctions book. Des is a 5 behaviors facilitator. And if you don't have conflict, then you can't really get to the results you want. So I love that you use that to your advantage. So many people are afraid of creating conflict towards them. That's very much, to me, that is the epitome of consciousness, is how do I put my ego aside so I can invite other people to be in a space of comfort. I think what peaks in my mind, Jolie, is you have been in such a very masculine industry. And masculine industries often come with that masculine energy of like more, harder, faster, kick them in the ass, get them to get their job done. And your approach is bringing in, not just because you're a woman, but your approach with it is bringing in the feminine energy of curiosity, trust, transparency. How do we get to know each other? Has that been easy to do? Or has there been a little bit of an uphill of matching that feminine energy with the masculine of the industry you live in?
I do think on some level that I have been very lucky as a woman because when I walk out into the field or I talk to people, even to this day, people see me and think, Jolie looks so friendly. She looks so nice. And so and I've been told that I can be very disarming. And I think part of that is my natural personality style. One of the things that I had to learn is personally for me, I don't want people to be mad at me. I want people to like me. On the disc profile, my highest is yellow. I wanna sing kumbaya with my team. I love them so much. But what I've had to learn is, and I really learned this in my first couple supervisory jobs at the facility in Pennsylvania, was people who, when I started as a young engineer who helped me and mentored me, I then progressed and became their supervisor. So operators who had taught me the unit operations and I say taught me everything I know, then had to work for me. And it was amazing the switch that happened all of a sudden when it went from I'm helping you and oh I like Jolie to now Jolie's my supervisor. And it was very hard and I didn't navigate that elegantly because I thought, why, if I was friends with you yesterday, today, are you being so rude? And I had some random things where I would have operators call and scream and yell at me about changing the locks on the toolbox. And meanwhile, I was just trying to make things better for them. And why don't you understand? These are my intentions. And so as I matured, I recognized, oh, just because I judge myself based on my intentions, others are putting different intentions that they think I have based on my actions. And so I realized, okay, I need to have some distance from that where I can't, it's not about me. It's not about what I want. It's not that I want to be friendly and have this nice warm environment. That's not what people need from me as their leader. Sometimes as the leader, I need to do what's personally painful. I need to create an environment where I am completely alienated so that the team comes together. That is so hard, but I feel so blessed. My husband, Jason, is my number one ally. He backs me up, and I come home and I'll tell him, oh, I had the toughest day. I had to get my team all riled up about something. And he's like, well, that's what's best for the team. And so he's really helped me think through, how do I reconcile, it's not what I need, it's what's best for the team. And part of that, bringing my full self and who I am. I'm very expressive. I tell people how I feel, whether it's happy or whether it's angry or it's sad, but it's being as authentic as I am, and that takes a lot of risk and exposure and vulnerability. And I'm willing to go there, and I think people realize that, and it makes a huge difference for that trust that I'm able to build. But it is not without fear and sometimes personal pain. But as the leader, I need to do what's best for the team. Desiree has helped me a lot through team building with my individual teams to help really accelerate that as well, because bringing in an independent facilitator to help people learn for themselves and understand vulnerability is different for all of us, but it's helping to build that trust so that we can get that momentum quicker. And I think I have, as I've matured and progressed in my career, been able to get better at doing it a little bit faster, but by having other people help me, realizing it doesn't, just because I tell you, trust me, it doesn't mean that people will trust me.
there's a reason why, trust is a foundation for any high performing team. It takes a lot of self-awareness, Jolie, to suspend yourself, like how you might default into leadership, and to suspend your ego even to do what's right, by the team and by the organization. That's not easy to do. I'm curious, what advice would you give to younger women, especially women who are entering the workforce into like that, kind of ego driven, male dominated types of industries or cultures?
Yeah, the best advice that I give any woman who asks me is be yourself. The most difficult issues I've seen, and I haven't had this problem. I'm very much I live out loud. I know people will. I joke around that people will say that, oh well, I think when Jolie asks me a question, she already knows the answer. I'm like, I'm just not that deep. If I have a question, I say it out loud. I ask it. I tell you how I feel. But what I see some women do is they look to the male role model and they think, okay, well, I'm just going to be like that. I'm going to be ice cold and, fact, thought. And that's not who we are. People know if we're not being authentic to who we are. The other part is being humble and aware of yourself. The best work that we can do to help ourselves be successful is know who we are, tell people who you work with and who work for you, your strengths, your weaknesses, and be okay with it. There's times where, and as you know, I'm very high energy. That can be very challenging for some people, especially people who are lower energy or who want more time to think. I'm very fast, so when we're troubleshooting an issue at the refinery, I have a lot of experience in refining. I've my background in operations, so I will pepper with what about this, what about this, and I'll totally forget all that stuff I just said about, oh, let people get there, let them do their job, because it's like if there's a crisis, boom, I'm in. I want to know every single thing about every single thing. And so right away recognizing, how do I help be the best that I can, but also recognize that that might not always be the right tool for the job. And so I tell people, getting to know yourself, getting to know what your triggers are that make you, because there's many a time where I realize I'm in a situation, I think I'm not helping this situation, but it took me years to figure that out and say, okay, I realize that I need to let the team figure this out. I'm going to back out. Call me if you need me. And I think in crucial conversations, they call it the critical lover, which I always thought was kind of a funny thing to call it. But find someone who can give you honest feedback in a constructive manner in a way that you're able to accept it, and then accept it. Because for some of us, feedback, have you ever had somebody come in and say, oh, can I give you feedback? That's like the worst, right? But if it's somebody that you really trust, find somebody who will help you to recognize when your authentic self is not the right way to be for that situation, and figure out how to manage those strengths and weaknesses. There's so many people who I think prescribe to the, well, I'm an extrovert, so I think out loud, and that's not good, so I should just stop doing that. That's not feasible. I don't know who in their right mind thinks they're that good at changing themselves. But so instead of that, recognize, okay, if I need to talk through it, who do I have who I can talk through and be a thinking partner? Find that person, use that. If you're an introvert, figure out for you how to give yourself that quiet space to think through. But realize that there's times where you might need to fight for your team, or you might need to be and really harness. And maybe you don't have that skill set. So does somebody on your team have that? Can you let them do it? As a very extroverted feeler, I surround myself with introverted thinkers who can help me make sure, we need to make sure we're making a thoughtful decision. and this is what I need from you to help me be better. How can I help you to be better? But it's realizing as a team we're better than an individual. But it's taken a decade to compile that team of support, but it's recognizing, know yourself, realize that it's okay to be who you are, don't try to be someone else, and get people who can help you manage a boss that I worked for years ago used to call it your native state. Manage your native state, because if that's not the right tool needed at the time, then figure out how to get someone there who can be that person.
Jolie, it's been, we could hang out with you the rest of the day and just keep hearing. You're an incredible storyteller, and I'm just like mesmerized by like, tell us another one. I've taken so many notes. I know Des has too. I'm sure our listeners have done the same. And thank you for sharing your time and your wisdom and your experience and your insight. And thank you to Des, like slam dunk on inviting Jolie to join us on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such an honor. Thank you, Desiree. So good to meet you, Amy.
Before we wrap up this episode, here are Des and I's takeaway from Jolie and how we can incorporate them into our work and our lives.
Boy, I just freaking loved how Jolie shared the story and demonstrated courage and really the bravery to be her own antagonist. You know, sometimes in leadership, it's like we're going to take all of the lights off of us, and she put it on her team to demonstrate to them ways that they could really be a stronger team, and brought out exactly what she was looking for with them, right? It was, I want them to be thinking critically, and I want them working together. And she literally had banded them together against her. It was the book, but I just thought that was just genius.
I love that. And that leads me to my big takeaway, which is just like her humility, because she's earned the right in her career to go in when she's working on a new team or whatever, to just be like, okay, everybody be quiet. Here's what you need to do. Here's how we need to do this. Here's what works. Here's what doesn't. And she takes the opposite approach, which is patience, watching. I love that she like broke that in, like I watch, I observe, I get to know people, I find out what they're interested in. She gains their trust through their humanity. And then by the time she is ready to share, everybody's like, hey, we're all in. We totally trust you. And I think that, like, same with your takeaway is, gosh, it requires us to put ego aside and be all in on the team and operate with humility. And that was so inspiring to hear from her.
Yeah, I agree. When, taking that time when someone knows you, they love you, they trust you, you'll run through a wall for them. It seems counterproductive because it's like, oh my gosh, I don't have time to do this. And that investment just paid dividends for her and over again. So the last thing that really stood out for me, I loved this advice for someone young in the workplace, but this is true for all of us. Such a great reminder to be ourselves, to be authentic and humble and aware. And that really starts with knowing who you are, understanding your strengths and understanding your weaknesses, and then making sure that you have people around you who can help to manage into those weaknesses. And so, some vulnerability there. But if again, there's a bit of a theme. If we go in guns blazing, we miss that opportunity to, really connect with others and to learn and to remain open from what others can teach us.
Thanks for listening to the Conscious Habit Podcast. If you dug this episode, we'd love it if you would subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And if you're into this consciousness thing, if you like this conversation and you want to meet more like-minded people, head on over to Facebook and join the Conscious Habit community. Until next time, do the world a favor and go love yourself.